It's official. The New York Islanders will have the opportunity to hire their top target to be the president of the franchise, as the Toronto Maple Leafs have elected to move on from Brendan Shanahan. However, this does not necessarily mean that Brendan Shanahan is going to be the next president of the New York Islanders. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest, but really quickly before we do that, we've noticed that 80% of you are not yet subscribed to the channel who watch these videos. So if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel. It's free. Now let's get right into today's news, and that is Brendan Shanahan has moved on from the Toronto Maple Leafs. They had their board meeting today, and they've elected to go in a different direction. It seems like for those of you who follow the Toronto Maple Leafs, they will be either promoting Brad Treveling or just keeping him in his current role and not having another president. This is not really important for the New York Islanders, though. What is important, as there are reports that Brendan Shanahan will be interviewing not just for the president role, but also perhaps for the general manager role. There have been some reports that the Islanders are interested in seeing if he is able to be the GM as well and having him wear both hats, which is definitely different from what we were hearing initially. As we know, Brendan Shanahan has been with the Toronto Maple Leafs for the past 11 years. I said 9 years in my last video, but it has been 11 years. And for all 11 of those years, he has been in an executive role. He has not been the general manager. Yes, he has had the ability to nix trades and really control the direction the team goes in because he was in charge of the general manager, but he has never been a general manager himself, and I truly don't believe this is the best direction for the Islanders or the direction they're necessarily going in. Although I do want to note when it comes to what we're talking about in this video, which is this news that he is no longer with the Maple Leafs, while it does make it very likely that he will be the next president of the New York Islanders, it's not necessarily guaranteed to be the case, because one thing we have to note with Shanahan is he was making a ton of money on the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs have an endless amount of money when it comes to making sure their hockey operations are the best of the best, almost to the points where there's almost too many cooks going on in that organization. And I really think that's actually one of the flaws they have. You're likely going to see them cut down in this year's offseason, which would be an opportunity, especially if the Islanders do get Shanahan to really pick up some really good hockey talent. But in terms of the money the Toronto Maple Leafs spend on their front office, while the Islanders don't, well, there's no salary cap in the NHL. You can only spend so much money on your roster. There's really no limit when it comes to what you can spend on your front office. And Toronto takes full opportunity when it comes to that, hiring as many people as they possibly can, really, in some scenarios. Kind of the opposite of what you have with the Islanders, where it was pretty much just Lou Lamoriello and a few other names, but really, Lou Lamoriello was pretty much where all the Islanders' money was going in terms of front office. While the Toronto Maple Leafs, not only do they pay Shanahan handsomely, they also have a couple other members of their front office who also get a lot of money. And this is definitely one thing that is relevant when it comes to New York Islanders. As we've seen recently, while there haven't been cuts in terms of the front office, that's definitely going to be up to Shanahan if he gets the role, and if not, whoever else is the president of the Islanders, whether it be Mathew Barzal or Marc Bergevin or somebody else will have the decision on who to cut. But we've noticed, at least earlier in the offseason, that the Islanders cut their broadcast team in terms of the radio broadcast. They've done some other small moves, kind of cutting a few dollars here and there, and it really makes you wonder if perhaps this idea of Shanahan being interviewed for both roles is potentially a cost-cutting move, in the sense where the Islanders really don't have, well, not that they don't have money, but it really seems like perhaps this ownership is reluctant to spend too much money on this front office, which really makes this Shanahan thing perhaps not as much of a slam dunk as people think it is. Yes, I still think that Shanahan will be the next president of the New York Islanders. I think the link is too good for it just to be something that doesn't happen. I mean, he has connections to the New York area. He's partially based in New York. His family loves New York, but I really wonder how much the Islanders are willing to spend on this front office, especially considering in a situation if Shanahan is only interviewing for the president role, as Stefan Rosner has only confirmed that he is interviewing for that president role, and you got to trust Stefan Rosner above anyone else talking about the Islanders, because one, he's going to know more, and just also he's just more reliable, and that is why we always talk about Rosner on this channel, because he never seems to leak false information. His information is good, and also he's just a really good journalist. He's a good guy. I really appreciate all he does when it comes to covering the Islanders. But we don't have confirmation that Shanahan is officially going for both jobs. But if it is a situation where he is only the president, then the Islanders are going to have to shell out more money to bring in a second guy, whether it be a Bergevin, a Darsh, or someone else. And while somebody like Darsh might not command top dollar in the sense where he is a first-time GM, he is still a general manager. And if you hire him, it is not going to be cheap. And all these other talks, we're going to talk about more about how Shanahan can really invent the Islanders and really provide a lot of value. This is going to cost money, and it makes me really wonder if perhaps, this is not a slam dunk. Perhaps the Islanders owners are not going to want to completely either just commit to hiring several more people in the front office, which is really what you want to bring in Shanahan for. The whole value for Shanahan is not what he's going to do for the NHL roster, at least immediately. Where Shanahan brings a ton of value is, first of all, his pedigree and the way players look at him, but more importantly, in the way that he's able to really attract some other really top hockey minds, which is something the Islanders need, and if he comes to the Islanders, is something I'm really looking forward to. But it's also something that's going to cost a lot of money. As Chris Broda talks about, kind of commenting on this situation, first of all, he mentions that Shanahan does seem to have a solid relationship with Mathew Darsh and Mark Bergevin, so perhaps Shanahan getting hired doesn't really change much in terms of the GM search. Perhaps it's a situation where the Islanders kind of forward their top targets. Obviously, if he's going to be the president, it likely makes sense that Shanahan is going to make that final decision. Perhaps that's why the Islanders haven't made that final decision, because it seems like they're pretty high on both these candidates, and stuff has just stagnated. Chris Bott has also mentioned perhaps Shanahan will bring in Brendan Shanahan from the Maple Leafs in some sort of major role. Do want to emphasize the Maple Leafs made it really clear today that the only way they are considering letting Shanahan move on is if he is getting a promotion, which means he would have to be either a general manager or a president. So in the case of the New York Islanders, he would have to be a general manager. So perhaps a Shanahan situation with the Islanders could really shake up this search for the Islanders. Chris Botta also mentions that he wouldn't rule out Shanahan hiring Rob Blake as a scout or a consultant, as they're close. And this is, again, what I'm talking about, where yes, this would be really interesting. Rob Blake has a lot of experience with the NHL, formerly the GM of the LA Kings. That's going to cost a lot of money. And while it does seem like all the dots are connecting to Shanahan coming to the New York Islanders and really bringing in a new staff, an analytics-based staff that the team probably desperately needs, revamping that scouting staff, you do have to wonder how much the Islanders owners are willing both to commit to Shanahan, as it's rumored he was making $7 million per year as the president of the Maple Leafs, and that's not even considered. They also had to pay their general manager, their assistant general manager. That was just for Shanahan. Are they going to be willing to give enough money for Shanahan to even be interested in this job offer? Because they can want Shanahan for this position, but if they're not willing to pay up what he wants, perhaps he decides to go in a different direction, or, just says no and decides that he's made enough money with Toronto. That's something you definitely have to consider. And also in these talks, are the owners going to be willing to really spend to do what Shanahan is going to want to do with the Islanders? There seems like there's so much talk about how this makes a ton of sense, and it really does. But you also have to keep in mind some of the moves that have been made by ownership earlier with the Islanders this offseason, and some of them don't quite align with the New York Islanders going with Shanahan. And again, I'm not saying that this is not going to happen because of money. I think it is very likely that Shanahan comes on board with the New York Islanders. It seems like the owners don't really want to be focused on meddling in the hockey operations, and that's really why you bring in a president to really control all of that for you on your behalf. But it's just interesting that going with two people in the sense of one general manager and one president is not exactly aligning with what the Islanders owners have done so far this offseason. And that's why I mentioned it. And perhaps they're just cutting costs to really allow the next president to spend. That will have to wait and see. But until then, it's just something I definitely think is worth noting. We've been talking that as soon as Shanahan got let go of, it'd be a guarantee that he's going to be the next president of the New York Islanders. And again, I still think that's the case. I just don't think this is a guarantee. We're going to have to see how that interview goes. I don't really see there being any issue between the interview. Perhaps Shanahan's vision for the Islanders doesn't fit with what the owners want. And in that case, I think it would almost be an instant conclusion if they decide to go in another direction from Shanahan, or even if Shanahan gets the job, it seems like they are really close with Mathew Darsh and Mark Bergman. I think it seems like they really like both these candidates, as David Pagnotta has tweeted. We do got to keep in mind when he's saying the Islanders are zeroing in on these two candidates, although it has been talked about by several other reporters. David Pagnotta was famously wrong for saying that the Islanders had signed Nadim Kadri. Obviously, that didn't happen. Some people were poking fun of him for that on Twitter. Still, it does seem like the Islanders are sort of concluding this search. Likely, they're going to interview Shanahan. If they like him, he'll be the president of this franchise. And if not, they're probably going to go in one of these two directions. So, in that sense, I'm going to guess that we are going to have some news on this tomorrow. I could be completely wrong. That is just me spitballing here. But I really think this search is coming to a close, and I hope it's coming to a close because once the Islanders pick their president and pick their GM, that's when the fun begins. That's when we actually get to start talking about what they're going to be doing with this team, and then we really get into the offseason. As always, let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Do you think perhaps there could be a situation where it doesn't work out with Shanahan and the Islanders in terms of money and they have to go in another direction? Or do you think I'm just maybe looking a little too into some of the minor moves the Islanders made in terms of streamlining their broadcast? I'd love to know your thoughts. As always, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.